Welcome to the Fitness Queens podcast, empowering your mind and sculpting your body. Join your hosts, multiple fitness world champions, Alicia and Stephanie McHugh, as we explore all things female health, training, competing, mindset, and living the fitness life every day.
Hi, everybody, and welcome back to the very first episode post-Christmas of We Fitness Queens with my beautiful
After the new year.
co-hosts.
Happy New Year, everybody. And Happy New Year to you, Ali. Refreshed, ready to roll. 2024 is before us, and we're ready to kill it, aren't we?
100%. And, look, we were talking about, offline, the things that we're stepping into in 2024 and recognizing that show schedule and show season, the competitive season is right upon us. And I literally just did this post in the last week. I had, we're having just a conversation, the team and I, and we're talking about red flags. And one of my girls was like, I'm just going to record you for a second. And we ended up doing a post and we made it, quite conversational style post. And it got a lot
Love that.
had a lot of comments and a lot of inboxes from it. And, it made me kind of go, hey, Steph, I think we should probably, let's kick off the year with this, because it is such an important topic about the fact that, just because you decide you want to compete doesn't mean that then you go hit the ground running with a 12-week cut and get on stage. There is so much more to it.
Did you just say 12-week cut? Oh, what? They're just going in straight to just a prep.
A common misconception. Yeah. So and we were talking about this because we obviously see this a lot in our client base with conversations, moments in conversations that are being raised where you're like, oh, you are so far from being able to actually start a prep process now that we need to actually revisit and take 4 or 5 steps backwards and set these things up first. And, we were just chatting about it, Steph, offline, relationship with food is one of the biggest things. And it's a big red flag if someone is incapable of having, a solid and healthy and balanced approach to things. There are a lot of red flags that pop up for me that are indicators that, okay, this is not right timing. This is not right season. This is not right for you right now. And that, I will then go into those conversations with clients. But on that note, Steph, what are your sort of top 5 when you go, oh my God, that is a flag?
Man. Look, going off what you just said, because I think it is like for a first-time competitor, they're thinking 12-week preps, 14-week, 16-week preps, or heck, I've even heard as crazy as 8 weeks for some people. Like, I want to do a show. I want to do an 8-week prep or a 6-week prep. And I'm like looking crazy. Like, you competed before? I think that's like my number one question first, because if it's a seasoned competitor, different story. Like if you have maybe sufficient muscle mass, which is really my number one. Like, I think anyone that goes into a show has to, number one, have sufficient muscle mass to even lean out properly. If you don't have that foundation, the layers underneath the body fat to actually say, hey, I'm going to peel back these layers and see what I got under there, which is essentially what this process is, guys. Like, if you haven't already built, some solid foundation, maybe some years underneath your belt of strength training. And hear me out, because strength training is the biggest portion here. I've had athletes, and I say athletes because they have maybe been more cardiovascular endurance athletes that have came and they wanted to do a show. And it's like, man, like, you're great at cardio, you're great at agility, you're great at explosiveness, but you don't have the power for strength, and you don't have sufficient muscle mass to be able to, let's say, get leaner and see something better. So in that case, number one thing I have to look at, and I would say as my number one, is muscle tissue, right? Lean muscle mass. So number one would be years underneath their belts, how much muscle tissue they have, and can they actually do a cut and not suffer? Meaning, of course, it's going to be gruesome, but not suffer in the aspect hormonally, that deter their health. I think those are the first things that I would definitely look at. Secondly, would just be if they have really bad relationships with food, like you said. I think that's big. Huge red flag. Huge red flag with the food. Like, if they don't know really categories, what these food categories do, how they supply you fuel, and how to actually combine meals. Because people that don't have a good relationship with foods then actually go into this all strict mentality and can't do, obviously some other things. And doesn't mean that you have to be extremely flexible, because I actually don't believe in going into the last few weeks. We've had this conversation on the podcast. It's good to a certain extent, and then you got to like pick up the level of how you actually, go into prep. So
Meticulousness.
yeah, it just goes into how you actually can address food. Do you understand the value? Do you understand, what it does for you? You have no bad relationships with food. So I think that would be my second. My third would definitely be like probably someone that has never done this period, like particularly with someone that's never done a prep, has not tracked food in general, like just doesn't understand tracking output. Like for me, it's really expenditure, even tracking, because some individuals don't understand how much they're burning, how much they're expending calorically. Therefore, they don't ever create a deficit correctly or in a time manner. So that would be understanding your output, your intake. And so that would be tracking just in general, just knowing where your base level is at, what creates a deficit, what kind of strategy, which leads me into my, I guess, next one would be like not having a game plan and just not knowing how this process works. So yeah, it's going to be tough. Yeah, it's going to be a little hungry,
That's
a
gonna
little tired.
suck sometimes.
Yeah, but then you're going to have good days. So it's like just understanding the process, your forecast. I always say this to all my clients. I'm gonna give you a little forecast, because like I watch the news just for the forecast. Like I don't know about you, but I don't watch the news to know what the hell is going on, because the media is just, in
Just
my
my
opinion,
forecast, people.
corrupt. I just want to know what the weather is like. So I want to know if it's going to rain. I want to know if it's, going to be sunny for the next few days. So a forecast to me as a coach telling my client is like, this is what to expect. So if you don't know what to expect and you don't know what's to come, you don't know what a game plan to have, then we're probably not ready. So which leads me into probably, having body issues or the wrong timeline. So you've got just so much going on. It's just not realistic. It's just not a realistic time
That's
to do
actually a
a
great
prep.
one. That's a great one because,
Like,
the red flag of schedule already too full, commitments already, way too heavy for you to actually lean into it and execute it
give it
without
100%.
additional undue stress. Exactly, exactly. I like that one. I didn't actually have that one, but I think that's a great one and probably one that most people, overlook. So I think that's great. And, we sort of talked about some of the things that pop up where we're like, oh, okay, need to reassess this. And I think, on the back end of that for our first time competitors, I would suggest finding out what your why is. And I know we've talked about this on previous podcast episodes, but it's like, it should never come from a place of I'm racing away from this. I need to change this about myself. I need to look different because of, usually stemming to self-confidence and esteem issues. Instead, it should come from a place of, hey, I want to set myself this challenge. I want to take myself to another level. I want to chase self-improvement. I want progression in my physique. And, I really want to test myself as an athlete. Like, it should be about those conversations. And I find if it is largely, you've tended to already tick the boxes on the things that are key parameters to know that you can have a successful prep. And so on the back end of that, if you're not running away from something and you're running towards something and you're trying to challenge your limits, usually you are already exhibiting a lifestyle conducive to prep. And what I mean by that is, and we've talked about this, you are really quite good with tracking. You have a level of accuracy. You are really well, you've got a good nutritional literacy, really well versed in, the basics on nutrition and fuel and timing and why things might be incorporated into the diet and the impact they have on you. You would be someone who has followed a training regime, and you are not a gimmicky tick and flick and follow all your influences and change things because you feel a little unmotivated one week. You're someone that does the basics, executes them well, masters them, continuously, progressively loads with them, and probably has the same lifting structure for 8 to 10 weeks even. Sometimes I get 12 weeks out of mine as long as I can continue to load. But the point being, It's not about chasing or avoiding monotony, and you're not looking for something to constantly spice things up. What you're doing is you're embedding yourself in the process of getting better at something, like absolutely
Self-improvement.
mastering something over a period of time, and continuously week in, week out, session in, session out, looking to improve on the last session. It's that mentality. So you would be exhibiting that. You would also be someone who's already implemented a pretty substantial build phase, like where you are like, I'm here, I'm trying to grow, I want to get strong, I want to change my shape and my physique. I'm not stressed about staying the same weight, gaining a little weight and not losing weight. I'm not looking to shrink. I'm actively leaning into this space of, potential more curves and potential discomfort. But it's more about, challenging yourself in that space before you even try a cut phase. And to be fair, you should also have already done a cut phase at some point. You should know the feeling of dieting. You should have experienced it. You should, be able to sit with the discomfort of hunger and be able to work through the process of a specific defined period of time where your focus is on then not growing, but instead actually dropping a little bit. And I guess the question I always say to people is, when you do these things, did you even enjoy it? Because if you went through that process and you physically, violently, vehemently hated it, then I would say this sport's not for you and you probably shouldn't practice.
Oh, yeah,
Like,
that's actually a really good,
you know what I mean?
I guess, perspective too, because, and look, I'm really taking in everything you said, because I love all those notes that you touched on. People being, extremely knowledgeable already, or having gone through maybe some mini preps or mini cuts or something
Yeah,
of that nature. But let's just be real here. Anyone can do a prep. It's as long as they're coachable. Like, if they're
correct.
coachable and they're
Yeah.
willing to just take,
Mhm.
your guidance, and as a coach, of course, you're a good coach and you're guiding them correctly, then you are actually going to walk them through all these things. You're going to
Yeah.
teach them the
Yeah.
deficit is, actually something normal, right? Like, to feel
Yeah.
hunger. This is what's going to
And
come out of this.
I think
So,
probably where we'll go with that conversation too, Steph, and you'll agree with me, is that it's not something where all of a sudden you decide, hey, I'm going to go hire a coach and 12 weeks from now I'm on stage. It should be, I'm going to hire a coach and I'm going to learn the things that we've just
yes,
discussed, and they're going to help me set
yes.
myself up for success. And we're going to have the blueprint and the baseline and the pre-prep phase under my belt. They're going to actually be able to talk me through what to expect. And in Steph's case, give you the forecast. They're going to give you the negatives as well. Like, we talk about these things all the time. A prep process is something that it is not easy, and it is not for everyone. There's a reason not everyone does it. There's also a reason why there's only a very small handful of people that are ever at the top, because the level of sacrifice, the things you're going to experience that include, energy drops, libido drops, social event sacrificing,
A lot of sacrifices.
your perception of what lean is completely flipped on its head, because what you thought
Body
was lean
dysmorphia is
is like,
real, you guys.
correct. So not even what you're going to get to stage, looking like. And then letting go of it on the other side as you recover is a whole nother bag of tricks. And, you get to this place where you have to expect to feel very, very, very uncomfortable at times in the process. And, I find that if you're not working with someone that's already giving you those expectations and warning you of, this will be around the corner in this next step or in this next phase or in this next adjustment, you can expect to feel this and this at these points in time, man, it's going to be something that will be so hard to work your way through. So,
It
I think
is
you're
very
so
hard to
right.
navigate.
I think coachability is a big thing. I think having worked with the coach to set these foundations up prior to the cut imperative. And then I think, you know, when you're working yourself up for this, it's understanding that it's the physical and the metabolic foundations that have to be, you know, established before you even go into a cut phase. So if I'm talking to an athlete and I know that they are still not yet niggle free, injury free, they're still not yet mastered some of their main big lifts, we're still not progressing in the physique, even in an off season with them undertaking, you know, maintenance and surplus calories, then it's still not the right time yet, you know, and we still probably need a slightly longer phase, because without building that foundation and that quality metabolic muscle tissue, when we cut, what are we going to reveal? Either no change or improvement on the last physique, the last stage,
Soft tissue.
or I hate using the word skinny fat,
I
but
don't. I honestly, that's the best way to refer to it, Allie. Though, like that
it's a
really is the thing.
thing.
I just say soft tissue to be nice, but like it's
Yeah,
skinny
it
fat.
is.
Like
It is.
you actually look skinny fat. You're a skinny individual, and you still feel fat. Like you actually feel it, but you're not.
There's
Like
just
you're really
not
actually
the
not
quality.
aesthetically.
Correct. There's not the quality firmness and shapeliness and,
That
you know,
hardness of the
tapers that we
muscle.
need with those, you know, exactly those
There's no
lean.
hourglass shape either. I think a lot
Correct.
of girls are like, well, why don't I get the waistline? Why don't I get my abs? Like, I'm like,
You
girl,
haven't
we
built
gotta get
everything
your
else.
habits under control. Number one, we gotta get the habits lined up because,
Yeah,
like
so
you're
true.
saying, if you haven't already done something to set up
Yeah.
habits, strength training has to already
Yeah.
be done. Like, I
Yeah.
don't care if you're a beginner. Honestly, I've had some of the best like first timers, and I mean that
I
because they're
love my first
with
timers,
me. They've
but
never done anything like
yeah.
at all. They like never really even touched weights before. And they're like, but I want to compete one day. And you know what? Like we'll go through a full-on year of adding some good lean mass onto their
Yeah.
frame. And then we'll discuss like what this looks like
Yeah.
going into an actual prep, because really
Agreed.
notice how I'm saying, let's build for a good year before
Mhm.
we actually discuss going
Yeah.
into a process of trying to peel back some of those layers. And it may not be as necessary for some individuals, because some individuals come from, being ectomorphs, versus a
Yeah.
meso, and like
Yeah.
just trying to understand their body type, their genetics, their genes, how they develop muscles. Some newbies, man, it's a pretty amazing how much they build muscle their
Those
first year.
newbie gains. I'm always so jealous
Oh,
of it. Like, oh
I
my
wish it was
God.
always like that though, because then they get
I wish I could
discouraged
have
even
that
down the
time
road.
back again. If I could
So
have
if you're
that time
listening to
back
this,
again, I
you're
would
a
be a
beginner,
beast.
take advantage, man. Like take advantage of the
Yeah.
fact that you can actually
Yeah.
add on quite a bit your first year and see some pretty
Yeah.
massive changes your
Yeah.
first year, because you're essentially starting in a clean slate.
Yeah.
It's just our, everyday activities, our needs that requires our movement and things that, we have, doing. So now it's about converting that energy and the fuel you're actually intaking into a different source and applying it to create muscle, which is an amazing, honestly, just result. You
I
get
love it.
addicted
I
to the
love the
process.
process of off
Oh,
season. I love working with my pros where we're building that next level pro physique, because, you know, the
mhm.
process of how we approach, you know, the check-ins through to the performance mechanisms, through to the data analysis, like it's, to me,
That is
so
so
much more
fun.
fun than just peeling back layers. Like it really is, because you are
Oh, yes.
actually like the Picasso painting your, you know, masterpiece. Like it's so cool. And I never understand
Addicting.
how people freak out about an off season, because I'm like, man, that's where the freaking magic happens. That's where you build the champion physique. So, you know, I
Amen.
think so working with someone that can coach you through that, if you have issues with that, is first key that you have to work through. But you know, this made me actually think of a situation with a client where we talked a little bit about first timers, and you know, the fact that they're very new and they have no idea about what the process looks like, to spell it out for all of you. But it's a different thing again when you're actually working with someone who is an advanced trainee, been
Mm,
training for a long time, might have transitioned across from like a
very
power-based
different.
sport, has a understanding of nutrition, but has been fueling for a different style of result,
Approach.
right? Or a different
Yeah.
sport. And so their approach might not be as well balanced, or you know, have strategies included in it for weight management and hunger management, and all these other things are important as we get into a cut phase. And then they also, like I found, I've got one client in particular that keeps coming to mind in this conversation. The pre-prep phase is so important with these individuals. And it's not because they don't have the coachability or those basic blueprints on the things that we, know need to happen from a understanding of tracking through to quality tissue, through to training, knowledge. It's actually about their ability to have the habits, rituals, and schedule and routine for a prep phase and a cut phase, because they don't typically come from it. So this is where a pre-prep phase is super important. And I have this athlete, so she's incredible and, can track macros, no issues. When we're in our off season, obviously we're always flexible. I allow for all of that. When we get into the nitty and gritty of a cut phase to stage, we like to optimize their structure and make sure we get the best result leading into the stage, right? From a conditioning perspective. And we had these conversations because she had a surgery leading into the start of a prep that we already had to manage, which meant we probably, after a DEXA scan, needed to drop body fat percentage a slight bit in order to go into the surgery, recover from the surgery, and then be in a good position, in that 10 to 20% from stage weight starting point, right? So we had a lot of conversations around, okay, these are the targets, these are the parameters, and I'm talking even down to, total sugar intake for the day. And after about 6 weeks, we identified that she was having a lot of issue hitting, fiber and the sugar. So keeping the sugar under 100 grams a day. I was like, babe, what are you doing? What are we eating? We go through this. Like, what the?
It's a lot.
We had a lot of fluctuations. And when I talk about fluctuations, I'm talking, sort of 20 grams out in certain macros. And, maybe went as low as 5.
It's inconsistency though, guys.
There was inconsistency.
It's inconsistency.
A lot of variables, a lot of fluctuations.
So life happens. It's correct. Like, let's just put it that way. Like, something's always going to come up. Correct. So giving yourself buffer. So anyone's listening that's planning to do a show, this transitional phase we're talking about is so imperative to make sure that you set up a progress rate that's actually, the rate that you need, not too slow, not too fast. Right. You're actually creating something that in your timeline. Let's say give yourself an extra few weeks to do this pre-prep phase. Ali refers to it as, I refer to it as a transitional phase into prep. Like, hey, we're going off this off season, right? Building phase. And we need to transition into prep. Yeah. Like, it's not just going to happen overnight. Yes.
It's the headspace and it's the accuracy, because as a coach, but also as an athlete, there's nothing more, I would say, limiting, frustrating, and anxiety building than feeling like you're not hitting the target points on expected rates of loss, right? But the only thing that will, delay that process of, rubber meets the road, hitting the targets and nailing it, is how long it takes you to get into the level of consistency, accuracy, compliance. It's those things, right? So what we did was I set her aside and went, right, this is it. You now need to be meticulous. These are the actual targets. If you don't hit them, and if you don't actually get these systems, habits, routines, and rituals in place in the next 6 weeks, and by this date, which was the kind of the cutoff point to be where we needed to be, we haven't achieved this, you can't do that show. Game over. You will not be competing till the end of the year. That is the word. Because you will not make the stage deadline. We will not put the most competitive physique on stage because we'll be too far out from a body fat percentage from a starting point that we wanted. And secondly, you're going to hate it. You're going to have a horrible experience. You really struggle. We're going to have such a slow out of the gate process that it's going to be detrimental to the entire experience. And then it will be detrimental to the whole post-show experience too. So she was awesome. She was like, oh shit, okay, this is serious. Like, I've got to actually pull
my shit together.
So she did. And you know what? And this is the thing. This is the coachability part, because you can have the clear, honest, open conversation. You can really spell out with very clear data and metrics too. These are the reasons why. These are the points we're not hitting. This is where we're going to
fix this. Yeah.
And what was great was she was like, okay, game on. I accept the challenge. And within literally 3 weeks, she was so on point, inconsistency, 1 to 2 grams only outside of target. Everything was in the parameters that we set, she was starting to drop. She was dropping at the rates we wanted. We literally got to the point of her surgery and we were only 300 grams above where I needed her to be. So
that's lovely. That's
it was
awesome.
exceptional. And then what was even better was her attitude, and because she was so ingrained then in this process and these habits and this approach mentally to how she was applying this calculation, and then even just the consistency throughout her days of wear and timing and all sorts of things that we worked on. When we got out of the surgery, she has healed far faster. She's followed everything to the letter. We haven't gone backwards. We are now even at the start of the actual full prep, a little ahead of the schedule that I thought we would be at.
Yeah, baby, that's
If we
awesome.
hadn't had that conversation, if I hadn't have identified that this was an issue now, and we were still probably 10 weeks from starting a prep, we would have been in serious trouble, and her prep would have been aggressive, lots of unnecessary muscle loss. Like, I just wouldn't have even done it. We would have pulled it. I told her that. I'm like, you're not doing it. If you can't get your shit together, we're not doing it, because I'm not going to put you through it. Right.
Yes, look, on that note, because I find that so many, let's say, competitors that are past competitors that just have bad taste. It's because they do these aggressive preps. They do these 8-week preps and they expect all the work, the build and the cut to be done all in this 8 weeks. And that is so unrealistic.
You're not building while you're cutting.
Oh, no, you can't. So please just remind yourself.
Maybe at certain points, there's still elements of it. Yes.
You're preserving muscle mass. Like, I think it's a little good perspective to think of it. It's like trying to preserve as much muscle mass as you can, but you're gonna lose even some in the midst of it. And guess what? You're not gonna build. I'm sorry, but it's not optimal.
Exactly.
If you build a little, it's gonna be a hair versus you can grow a full head of hair, right? Like during a build, it's like one little strand I might come out and like, okay, cool, thanks. But it's not like optimal. So you can't expect to grow in a cut. And I think a lot of amateurs or people that don't understand think that both are going to happen together. Like, this 16, maybe they even have a good timeline, like 16, 20 weeks, whatever they think, is necessary. But even then, it's not enough time for them to even cut. So to have that misconception of building and cutting, I just want anyone listening to just kind of get that out of their head.
Yeah, get it out of your head. Have the foundation first.
Yeah, you gotta have it. Yeah.
So that example that was one, relatively recent, like in the last 6 months, with an exceptional client, she's actually an exceptional athlete. That's one example of why a pre-prep phase is super important, and the difference, the reasons there might be differences too in where and how and when we apply it. But to give someone here listening to this that has no idea what a pre-prep phase is and has never done one and has never been exposed to it, the concept is that it's usually like a solid block of time, and depending upon, some of the variables we talked about, so your knowledge and where you sit as a beginner or an intermediate or an advanced trainee, and all of those factors will dictate how long this process might be. And for some people, it might be as short as 4 weeks and you're into the zone, you've got the set, you're in the flow, everything is optimized and you're ready to go. But for others, it might take 12 weeks. It might take 3 to 4 months of a pre-prep phase to get you to a point where mentally you're dialed in, schedule-wise, it's locked and loaded. You have the ability to say no to people and to set boundaries without any guilt. You have prioritized your values and your deadlines as something that's key of importance to you, and you act on that and you act according to that. It is literally the time where a competitor is put into the best possible starting point prior to the competitive season. So it's where, as we talked about, we're embedding the habits, we're looking at the daily rituals, we're looking at the routines and the variables that are going to prime you to do a cut without it being something that absolutely destroys you, or where you ruin the first 8 weeks trying to get it right and then wonder why the remaining 12 to 16 isn't enough time, and you don't come to stage looking properly. You look like you're still maybe 4 to 6 weeks out. It's because you didn't start right, not from day one, hitting the pavement and pounding. So what does this even include? If we're talking about this phase for people that aren't sure, one of the things that we always look at is identification of body composition. So where do we actually sit? Where
Number
are we
one.
sitting? We always have our, team do like a DEXA scan, which is, more your gold standard.
Here, if it's not for my USA listeners, in-body scans are pretty much like what your normal DEXA scan would look like here. DEXA scan is going to be a little bit more informative. It's going to give you a little bit more, of course, detail, but an in-body is a little more common here in the States.
And
people are more accessible to
they're
that.
more accessible, and they're also way cheaper. So whatever your data point is, you just use the same data point for consistency, guys. If that's what you're going to roll with, then you roll with that, and you use that as just a trending analysis. But the primary component and reason for doing that initial assessment is, well, how much do I actually even have to lose? Like, am I even where I need to be for a cut phase? Because that determines when the cut phase starts, but it also determines, am I even in the right space now? And do we need to do this pre-prep maybe at the right and appropriate time? Because the last thing you want to do, if a pre-prep phase includes a cut, you don't want to do a cut and then go straight from a cut into a cut, because you got nowhere to go. And there's all these down regulation and adaptations that occur that you want to try to avoid. So you kind of have to position the pre-prep phase far enough out that you could then come back to maintenance, have a little bit of a time period between the maintenance and then the actual cut, right? So you've got to determine, am I 10 to 20% body weight from my stage weight right now? Because if not, I've got some work to do, right?
And just to piggyback on what you just commented, because I find that there's just, of course, two different spectrums. We've got probably the majority of people that are falling underneath the category that you're referring to, that they need to lose body fat. They need to lose more than actually gain. But we've had that, percentage of people that actually are opposite, right? They actually need to gain more mass, gain more fats. Gain in every aspect, because I have some of my girls and I'm like, girl, I gotta get you to eat. I gotta get you to eat more. I gotta get you to like build up your metabolism so then we can train and then start prep. So my next different on, I guess,
it's
certain
so true,
individuals.
It's so true though. And that'd be my next point, which is realistically, right? And the reason that we would be having that conversation about whether or not a cut might be needed is because realistically, you should have already been in a build phase for 12 months or close to before you even start a cut. So you're listening to this, people turn the volume up. You should not be cutting for an entire year, then expect to do a cut to stage. You should have been building, getting it maintenance, and accurately tracking and focusing on nutrition quality and focus on fueling for performance and focus on nurturing the development of your physique. So when you cut the layers back, like Steph talked about at the very start, when you cut the layers back, you have the physique you need to be competitive on stage, but also you have health markers still sitting in a relatively good place, because we'll talk about this as well, whether you like it or not. This sport is one that is going to drive your health markers down, even with the best laid plans and even with the best approach. You are not able to avoid it completely, because we are literally starving ourselves on purpose. Okay, like we're retarded, but it's not a normal sport
to do this, and it's not healthy to do it for years on end. So if you're maybe a competitor that's listening and has FOMO and is like, no, but I gotta do a prep. Like, you're just always having that FOMO to just be in prep. And I've seen these individuals, and I'm sure you have too, Ali.
100%. I've 100%
crazy enough to just always be dieted down, and they
show to show.
Yeah, like just doing back-to-back shows and being in a deficit year-round. It's just the way they love to be stressed out and love to live. And it is not healthy, because guess what? I've seen the most is more hormonal imbalances, much more, let's say, autoimmune diseases that happen, immune system problems, like just constantly sick, injuries all the time. Like, God, so many things on end that just continue happening from staying in a deficit or in a cut.
100%.
Just saying, if you did a cut for a year and then decided to do a prep, you probably need to do that
build phase. Exactly.
Probably not on just building and then cut. But if you,
a big mistake I see people make is they will go, I'm only going to hire a coach at the very end when I need to do the cut. Yeah, okay. So
Makes me laugh
Again,
because
all of the
so
things we
common.
just talked about are a problem because the
They
best
don't have the
athletes
foundation.
and the best competitors and the ones that do the best actually work with someone all year round. And champions do that. I mean, I know I have always worked with people all year round
Oh,
in some
year.
capacity at some point on my journey. So for me, largely a lot of it has been around like the rehabilitative process with injuries and stuff. But then I have 100% had great mentors in the space that I practice and niche in, which is, you know, surrounding the food and the prep process itself. So if you fail to do that and you fail to still be coachable all year round in the time that actually matters, which is not the cut to stage, but the time from post stage through to the start of the cut, that's what matters most. And if you are not working with someone in that time with a little bit of structure, strategy, purpose, and education, I'm sorry, but you're just missing out on so much
You're
competitive
half-assing.
capacity, but
I'm
also
sorry,
health.
but
Yeah, and also
it's a
health.
half-ass.
So we're going to go and we're going to segue from the things that Steph just talked about, which is the other person that needs to put size on. So we're going to talk about that because that's going to take us to a different route, which is you should not be competing yet because you should be doing an off season. So we'll talk about that in a minute. But to finish off the you should not compete yet because we don't have the structure set up and you need a proper pre-prep phase, which means you might need to delay the season or you need to start earlier to do this pre-prep phase. It is also about making sure and confirming that you have a very healthy relationship with food, self, and training. Because if your conversations are in any way, shape, or form, you know, negative, self-destructive, more is more and not capable of actually looking at the process as the big picture, then that's also an issue. And then, as I said, it's the habits and the routines necessary for a successful prep that've got to be embedded in this phase. So not winging it for the first 4 to 6 weeks and hoping you get close. It's about being on point, on target, then hitting the start of the cut. That's important. The
The
other
light switch turn on. Like, because I feel
exactly.
like so many athletes are waiting so long to turn the switch on. And when that switch actually turns on, everything falls into place.
Yep.
Like those habits, everything, because they know that deadline is so close. But
Yep.
sometimes that's just turned on too late. And like
So
you've got to get it turned on quicker than
you
you actually
do,
think
you
it
do.
started.
And I think part of the pre-prep phase is, you know, the coach guiding people to what to expect. So that forecast, it's yes, promoting the positives and the pros that come out of the prep process and the self-development and the, you know, the stage experience itself, but it's also being really honest about, hey, this is the shit show that comes with it too, because these are the things you're going to feel at the different times. And these are the things we will do to try to mitigate the depth of which you feel them, and how you survive them and how you get through them. But you want to be aware of it, right? And I think not being aware of those things is detrimental before you step into the prep. You should already be aware of what's coming. I think the other thing is, you know, being really conscious and very comfortable that you can follow a consistent, structured approach to nutrition every day, day in, day out, that you are comfortable working with a meal plan, because I don't care who you are, at some point it becomes a meal plan, people, whether you are initially putting it together with a flexible macro approach or not.
Still come
There's
structured.
rigidity and there is structure and there is optimized structure, and it becomes a meal plan. So if you can't do that, then that's another question mark
Right.
to
But
work
people
through.
already come into it saying, I
Correct.
can't do a plan. And I'm like, well, you're not good for prep. Like, I'll
And
be
because
straight up. Like, if you can't follow something for the same days in and out, the variables need to stay the same for
yeah,
weeks on end. And some
yeah,
people can't do
it's
that.
true. They
And
do. And the
it's
other
just
thing
like
is,
being consistent.
it's where food becomes numbers, people. Like it's almost like food doesn't have the same meaning and the same, you know, enjoyment factor for you for a period of time, because it becomes about fuel, numbers, means to an end, purpose, strategy, and that is it. You know what I mean? Like that's kind of what it's like. So
Very neutral.
if you're someone who is a self-professed foodie and can't go without having multiple different dinners a week, then you may definitely struggle / not get the result you want in this process. So that's another thing.
But that doesn't mean you can't do it, because I want these foodies out there to listen right now. Look, if you're a foodie, I want you to realize it's temporary. You're not going to say goodbye to your
period of time.
It's a short period of time that you're doing it. And I mean, maybe short is not the good word for everybody, because for some
when
people,
you think about it though, short
it's just temporary. Like, I don't want to say the word short, because some people will say short is only 4 weeks. Like, I'm like, okay, let's change the.
I'm thinking short, more like 3 months out of 12, which is still a
like
great
a quarter of the year. Like a season,
Exactly.
right? Like a season. Like, but some people don't get that, I guess, understanding of knowing it's just temporary. So if you think you're about to say goodbye to your good, like, I guess, variety of meals for
Not
a
at
year,
all. That's not at all the
what we're
case.
saying here.
No,
We're
not at
just
all.
getting down to the nitty gritty. You've already started your pre-prep. You've already done good habits. It could have been through flexible macros, flexible approach. And then the systems become a little bit more rigid, because we understand the variables that are making your body respond.
That's what it is.
So that way, we want to keep those variables the same. You don't want to keep changing things weeks after weeks and just wonder, why does my body look different this week? Why do I not drop this week? And it's like, you want to create that progress rate. So if you're listening to this and you are a foodie, don't get discouraged because you think you're never going to, have a certain meal again. It's just going to be for a certain amount of time, and you'll then be able to reverse and implement them in a slow manner and just get them back in. And the reverse, honestly, is more about finding that lifestyle balance for you, which I know we've had multiple topics on reverse, and you can always go back and listen to those episodes in regards to reverse, just process and kind of what that looks like, and the struggle post show that we all,
which is a whole nother beast again, right? And I think if you're already having conversations and we're already identifying red flags prior to the cut phase even starting, then there is no way you're actually going to make it out the other side of the stage, because that side is even harder than the prep itself, quite largely. And so, when we're talking about the pre-prep phase, that sets you up for the success. It also will weed out whether or not you even enjoy it. It gives you an opportunity to be like, hey, this is not what I was thinking it was going to be. This is not glamorous at all. And maybe I should reconsider my goals. Do you know what I mean? Maybe I want to do a photo shoot instead. And there is nothing wrong with that. I think that this gives you that time and that opportunity without completely destroying yourself or your health, to determine if it's even for you. So that's our pre-prep phase. And then when we have those other, side of the scale, which we sort of talked about, where it's, and I have a couple of athletes that have been like this, so we can use them as examples too, where the conversations about actually gaining any kind of weight on the scale in a off-season process and getting their head around food and sitting at the right level of EA has been so challenging for them that they self-sabotage. They'll have days where they just don't eat all their food, and then they'll go on these crazy, like, wanna eat different. Yeah, like it's a mental hurdle for them. Then they can't go to stage. They can't even start a cut. They can't do anything until they move into a place where that
goes with the body dysmorphia. Like 100%. How those individuals that struggle 100%. With like gaining a pound or losing a pound, meaning in the way that they're just on top of like, oh my God, what happened? Or what do I need to do? Or like, my body's broken, or it's not fixed. Like all these things that I guess are narratives you tell yourself. You might have in this mentality of staying skinny or staying lean,
or having abs, or like
having abs. Yeah.
I think what I find, Steph, and you might get this too, for a lot of women, it's like this fear of letting go of a midsection. It's the first thing they always say is, I've put on too much fluff. I've got too much stuff going on around my stomach, and they freak out about it. And that's probably the biggest thing that stops a lot of women from actually building their physique and building their metabolism and getting to the place that we need them to be at. So, whenever I hear any conversation from someone and there's a hesitancy or a roadblock, or there is, constant conversations where they are putting themselves down, or they're pulling apart or picking apart one or two body zones only constantly, failing to see the progression in other body parts, or even the progression even in that zone that they're hung up on, my immediate thing is always, we're not competing this year. We're not even touching it. Don't even consider it. It's not even on the cards. And until we can get to a place where your conversation with self is definitely more positive, and our approach to the off season is one way you are not avoiding food or gaining weight or all of those things, there is no way we can go to stage. There is just none. You're not even in a position to consider it. So when we talk about the people that, you know, might have to lose, we're talking more about the people now that are, you know, needing to go the other way and actually lean into developing and gaining and growing versus, you know,
Well,
just cutting.
having someone that comes to you, if you're a coach listening, or like, man, this person has potential, but they really need to have a baseline, and they're from where they're at now, it's just not sufficient. They're going to literally be like just bones whenever they drop down because they're already so small. So really building up the frame, building out that hourglass shape, building up more legs, building up more glutes, right? Trying to actually build a nice taper in your upper body, because that's what, I mean,
all the
females are
things you
so,
actually need for
yeah,
the
females are so
day.
scared to build. I'm gonna turn manly. I'm gonna get bulky. I'm gonna get all of these things. I'm gonna lose my abs. Like, I want you to look at the upside. You're gonna actually gain strength. You're gonna gain a booty. Let's say hooray to that. Come on. Like, you're gonna have
100%.
glutes, even if you don't got abs,
100%.
because that's the plus
Yep.
during a build. You get to say hello, booty, versus bye-bye abs. It's okay. Like, it's no big deal. You gotta sacrifice something sometimes during different seasons
To be
to be
able to grow and be in a position to do it as a sport, you do need to, right? And you know what? Let's come back to your word, Steph. Temporary. It's temporary. You will 100% be able to peel back layers, and you'll be way happier with what you actually unwrap if you lean into and do a proper off season, because you're not going to be just putting something on stage. I guarantee you, this is what I see happen year in, year out. You'll get someone that's adamant and they're like, nope, I'm definitely doing stage. You can't talk me out of it, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay, you know what? Then fine. This is your lesson. This is your learning. It's not that we are in a bad position metabolically, but I'm going to tell you right now, you do not have enough muscle, and we're going to get to the stage and you're going to be scrawny and you're going to turn around and you're going to look at every other bitch in the lineup beside you and you're going to be like, shit, she was right.
It was
You know
right.
what?
I should have listened.
I do not look like I can be in the top 5. I am not competitive. And at first they'll blame everyone but themselves, but eventually they do come around and admit that, hey, you know what? I did need to grow more and I probably should have listened. I'd like people to listen to this episode though, and maybe avoid that part, because you don't need to spend that money, that time, that investment, and go through that mental anguish of self-critiquing yourself and pulling yourself apart after the fact. And instead just lean into and start to work through the discomfort of the reasons why you prevent yourself from going into an off-season / development / growth / building focus. Work through them instead, because they are going to be tied to some stuff that will be linked to things like self-confidence and self, acceptance and the relationship with self. And I think that's super important that you build through that and that you work through those elements, because once you do, you'll be an unstoppable force and you'll be very competitive in the sport. If you fail to do that, you're always going to have a limit, a ceiling on what you can present, but you're also going to potentially do some damage to yourself, both mentally and physically, So I really hope anyone listening to this has gone, okay, shit, maybe I need to take a year off, because I think that is the most underrated part of this process for a lot of people. They just don't want to do that part. And it is going to be the key to being a winning physique, a constantly evolving physique, a, competitive pro level physique, or someone who does it as a bucket list once and then regrets everything that they did along the way to get there, because they know in hindsight, they could have done things better. Do you know what I mean?
I do, and I agree, because I also want to make sure that anyone that's listening and hearing this, like, okay, I should take a year to build, like, I'll do that. But the biggest mistake I see people do, and you touched on this earlier, was they go into the builds maybe alone and they don't understand the efforts or what it takes to actually build muscle, and they think they're building. Like actually so many people think I'm gonna train on my own, I'm gonna do the thing, right? Like I'm gonna build, I'm gonna eat, I'm gonna bulk, I'm
Become a
gonna
beast.
and I'm gonna come
Come
back and then
back.
you're gonna prep me, like, and then I'm gonna come back for prep. So the biggest mistake I see is just doing a prep and
Yeah.
not actually being coached during a build.
Yeah.
There's so much during a build that requires coaching to
Yeah.
make sure you're actually adding progressive overload. You're actually making sure your body's adapting and you're
Yeah.
actually challenging your body to enter different phases to grow. Like I don't understand how so many individuals have gone through a build and never went through pain, meaning they never forced themselves to actually be challenged and
To
be
go to
so
failure. They don't know what
go to
actual
failure and
failure
actually
point
be
is.
so
Yeah.
like, oh my God, I feel like a bus fucking hit me. Like I mean it. Like woken up some
Where they're
days and I think
falling down the stairs after leg day, they can't get on the toilet. They're like, oh my God.
yes. But I mean months on end, like a good
Yeah.
year of doing that. But
Yeah.
most people will not push themselves to that degree
Yeah.
of failure, of actually knowing this
Yeah.
is where I need to be in order to grow.
Exactly.
So if you haven't
Exactly.
taken time with maybe a good coach to truly guide you through a build, then this
Yeah.
is probably a great time for you to take 2024 and say, I want to be competitive. I want to go
Yeah.
and build a great physique for 2025. Man, we're on the same boat. You can hop
Hey,
on the boat.
look, I was just going to say, you should have heard Stephanie and I talking about this on the very last episode with our intentions and where we're going and what our returns, respectively, to stages are. And neither of us are rushing. Both of us are, recognizing that we're going into build phases for the first time in quite a freaking long time and loving every concept in that process too, where, and this will be really great for a lot of listeners that are on that second spectrum that we talked about, that are anguish and anxiety and fear around it. Follow both of us, I urge you to, because we will both share various aspects of our journey respectively over the next sort of 12 to 18 months. And I think it's going to be really beneficial for you because we will both talk about all of these things, the discomfort points, the when we grow out of clothes points, the two different parts of the wardrobes that we have to manage because we've got our off season and our coming into stage cupboards. Like, we will share all of these things with you. And I think when you can see that the things we've discussed on the podcast we're actually putting into action, I think it might help some of you to move past that concept of I need to be Instagram worthy all year round. Well, actually, no, you freaking don't. You need to be honest and you need to show the people that don't know enough about the sport or that might be junior in it that it takes more than just looking abs and stage lean all year round on Instagram to actually be a role model, but be a very competitive and a high level athlete in the sport. It takes way more than that. You need to be able to have moved through all the various phases, and off season should be where you spend most of your time in the year. Quite honestly.
Yes, which again, if you're considering a prep and maybe you're a first timer, but you've actually been training. You've actually been training, maybe some strength training for a few years, or maybe just a year, you just started. But it's within that 12 months and you've actually, progressed. You feel like, man, I've actually grown since I first started, and you're a newbie, because I'm telling you, those newbie games, I
I'm
always get
jealous.
impressed. I am. I wish I could get what
thing.
you guys get in the amount of time.
Yeah.
But with that being said, don't get discouraged to do a show this year. I want you to actually map out, maybe do that pre-prep and start building up the habits and actually start doing the things that are going to set you up to have a successful prep, and making sure that you actually understand what a prep looks like. Because then that's going to give you that forecast to know, okay, this is what first part of the prep will feel, the mid part of the prep
foundation is,
of the prep.
Yeah.
And you'll actually be able to map out a good timeline. Of course, make sure that you're instilling these things day to day. Those variables get as consistent as possible as time goes on, because those variables are working for you with sleep, food, training, recovery, all the things that matter. So just make sure you're doing.
To recap, I think, and a great way to put it for all of you would be, okay, you've made the decision, I want to compete. Hands gone up. That's it for me. Okay, that's great. So don't wait until the comp prep cut phase to build the following skills. These are the things that should already be established. This is what we've discussed. This is where your pre-prep phase, and this is where an off-season is super important. Number one, tracking accuracy. You have to understand the fundamentals of tracking macros and calories, and you must be able to incorporate this skill consistently and accurately now, not when the cut starts, now. You need to be able to, when the dial needs to be turned up, turn it up and get discipline and structure around it. Number two, you need to have nutritional consistency. So being confident in your ability to prepare your food and eat according to the consistent schedule that we've discussed earlier that removes fluctuations and variables, and understanding that at some point the flexibility process, the dial goes down and you move into a meal plan structure because it is absolutely necessary at a certain point in the prep. So you need to be comfortable with knowing that and moving into it. You need a lifestyle that is conducive to the bodybuilding lifestyle. Is it ultimately something that you can sit in, be passionate about, love? Because you know what? Competing is a choice. Whether you like it or not, complain about the negatives. You chose to do it. You chose to be there. And the only time you're going to be truly successful in this sport is if you are passionate about the process. You love the challenge. You thrive in the moments that are hard. You come out of it feeling like a better version of yourself. If you're incapable of doing that, then again, sport might not be for you, but you can grow these skills as well. So I would start focusing on those. I would also think that training and body composition, so enjoying training, sticking to a very structured process that is not short and is not spicy, but instead is structured, strategic, purposeful, building the physique you need for the category you've chosen to compete in, and you're able to stick to it with progressive loading for 8 to 12 week blocks. That is what you need to be able to do. That is another skill. You also need the right level of muscle tissue. So if you haven't got it yet, recognizing that and getting into an off season, I would say communication is absolutely imperative. Setting boundaries with friends and family, having a good coaching relationship, being able to discuss, where you need to be, the pros and the cons of a prep, do the forecasts. It's understanding the journey you're about to undertake and acknowledging all of the points in it before you even step into it. And then I think the biggest thing and final thing is the expectations. What do you even expect to get from a comp prep? What is your why for doing it? Are you aware of what it's going to look like at various phases? And if you're not, then start talking to people and getting across it, because failure to have an understanding mentally and preparing a little bit mentally for those moments will make that prep process either really unenjoyable or incredibly difficult for you. So they're the sort of key skills and tips that I would give that I think are imperative before you even get to the cut phase. And I know we've touched on, a lot of these things in the podcast, but Steph, with the show season right upon us, I hope everyone listening to this has been able to go, okay, great. I recognize this, or I recognize that, or yep, shit, that's me. And has some sort of tool, resource, or understanding from the stuff we've discussed to go and do something about that, whether it's revisit their expectation on the show they had chosen and maybe change it, or if it's talk to the coach about maybe shit, we might need to do a pre-prep phase, coach, or hey, maybe, just maybe, I actually eat more food and we hit a stage in 2025 instead. I just think hopefully something has come out of listening to this for some of you.
Oh man, I really hope so too. And just to really leave you guys with a little final thing, because you might be having some listeners here and being like, but man, I thought I was going to compete this year. Now I don't feel like I'm ready to compete. I don't think I'm in the position to, go on stage. And I don't want to discourage anyone, because I do believe there's so much power within actually instilling habits for a prep. Maybe physically you may not be ready. You may not be having the right amount of level of muscle mass to enter a category. But just to let you guys know, with the FMG, there is a transformation category. And this category allows you to still participate in the whole show learn what the ins and outs of what it takes to compete, to maybe look at that in the future and say, this is my first deadline. I really want to get my feet wet, but I don't want to put the pressure on myself to say, I have to like be my best. I have to be ready. Like all the notes and key points that we gave today are for those that are ready to enter those classes and categories.
Open categories. Yep.
Okay. So like if
Open
you want to
categories.
be competitive, you want to bring your best, you want to level up. Everything that we said on this podcast is meant for you. But if you are a first timer and you're like, man, I don't think I fit any of the stuff that they talked about today, I don't want you to leave and think you don't get an opportunity to get on a stage, because you get to still learn how to do all of these things. If you hire a coach that actually understands what the outcome should look like and how to walk you through this, you're going to be fun, and you're going to probably gain way more experience about how to do this properly going in, instead of a competitor for a class category that would be open or your age category. Then you're going to actually be gaining just more of the mentality of, okay, I know how the travel works. I know how the show, organization works. I know what it entails as far as attire. I know kind of where I failed during my prep, essentially to get to that deadline. Because I believe in this so powerfully. If you have a goal with a deadline, you are going to get that magnet pull you in, and you're not going to deter because you have that deadline in front of you. No matter what, you're going to make it happen. And it's not about how you look. It's about making it to that stage, because you are setting a goal for yourself to actually say, I can do this. I know I can do it. It's not about anything else, about a look. It's not about a placing. It's not about a title. It's about going and proving to yourself that you can actually follow through with the goal, with the deadline, and say, I want to learn. I just want to learn. Is this for me? Is it not for me? You might have that itch. You just kind of want to wet your feet. Please try the transformation class.
And that's actually a really great point. I'm glad you raised it, because it is beautiful for that. It is about the celebration of where you are in your fitness journey at this point in time. It's not your final destination. So this is a really great way for people that, are literally in a different space where it's about losing, changing, getting to, a place that gives them a base even to prep for an open category. This is a great way to go about it. And you will actually learn where, you are in the trenches learning as you're going. So that is a great point to make. Primarily most of what we discussed was at our open category athletes, but you're right. There is by no stretch of the imagination no place for people that don't fit that just yet, because there is, and the transformation division is beautiful. We use it a lot for people that are kind of halfway there or 3/4 of the way there, to celebrate where they're at now, so that they actually still, have those achievements, because I think that is important.
It's one of the things, and I'll leave it at this, because it was a very touching class for me ever since I saw the class ever. And it was my pro debut. I'll never forget this. I watched a gal in a wheelchair roll herself in a two-piece on stage.
So beautiful.
And I was here fearful to even just walk. I remember shaking in my freaking boots. I didn't want to go on stage. It was my pro debut. I remember I met Hattie that show. I was like, oh my God, I like freaking just met Hattie, and like she's winning this show. And she did win that show, by the way. It was her first title win in my pro debut at the time. And I was just fearful in the lineup. And I had just seen this girl in transformation go out in this wheelchair, roll her chair, do a spin, and like bring her arms up above her head, and was just so confident in the fact that she was showing her story, meaning, I don't care if I can walk. I'm in a two-piece. I freaking prepped for this.
Right.
I look great. This is my stage. This is my time. And I was in tears. Like, I couldn't believe that I was sitting here in my two freaking fucking heels. I'm sorry, but I was like, she can't even walk. And I'm bitching about me going on the stage right now for my pro debut. And this woman is just proved to me what it takes to just be confident in your skin. It was so inspiring. And I cannot stress, some of the best stories are going to be on that transformation category stage. So if you have a story, if there's something that has driven you that, has happened in your life, whether if it was an illness accident, some, you know, obviously
Yeah.
overweight, like just weight loss journey. There's something for you. So don't get discouraged. Keep on building these habits. I hope that all the tips
Right.
for, of course, competitors that are already in prep or want to start a prep or looking to compete, took some good takeaways, but also those that haven't ever competed and want to maybe compete. This instilled an inspiration to maybe test out the
Yeah.
transformation and you didn't know about it. So definitely look at the FMG shows. They
Yes.
are released with their website. There's a
Yes.
new website. You guys can go and check it out and just see the criteria. They've looked, oh, it looks so beautiful the way they already have everything laid out.
Yeah.
So
100%.
learn a little bit more and just keep on listening to Ellie and I will bring you guys more information as
100%.
this new year, you know, unravels. But I'm blessed to have you, Allie. I'm blessed to have all of you. Thank you guys for
Likewise.
listening and
Likewise.
for
And I hope that everyone got something out of today. And if you have friends or family or anyone that's talking about competing, looking at competing in a process at the moment, and you
share the
listen to
message,
some of what we
share
said and
that.
it resonates, please share it with them. You know, please, you know, send us comments, send us experiences. We love seeing them, reading them. We acknowledge all of you, and we are so grateful for all of you. And if you have any questions too, you know, reach out, because we're always happy to help and happy to tell you if we think maybe you should be considering one of these other options before a stage. But until next week, I will look forward to seeing you all then. Steph, Happy New Year.
Hey, Happy New Year to you guys and you, Allie. And until next time, take care.
Bye.